Start with some prayers. Om Agyantimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutaha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Shute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Need the sound cable. I would need the sound cable. So I would like to welcome all of you all to the second day of the seminar on Live Not Exist based on Ramayan, the Game of Life. So I'll just quickly summarize what we discussed yesterday and then we can continue today's session. Yesterday we started our discussion by talking about Dashrath's desire, where Dashrath originally developed a desire to get his son Ram married, and the manifestation of Dashrath's desire came in the form of Vishwamitra. But when Vishwamitra came, Dashrath felt that Vishwamitra is a disturbance. So many times in life the lesson we learned is that there are invisible opportunities that come, but instead of understanding these as opportunities that could fulfill our desire, we consider them to be obstacles or disturbances. Then we spoke about how Dashrath, when the guard came running in and he told that an angry sage has come outside. So from the guard's perspective, he saw Vishwamitra as a person who was anger personified. But then Dashrath and all the ministers could very clearly see Vishwamitra as an exalted sage. So basically, when we look at a person or an object from external packaging point of view, you don't really appreciate the internal content. And then we spoke about two questions that Vishwamitra asked Dashrath and how these two questions were the perfect model for governance. And then we spoke about how Dashrath, he started over-enthusiastically appreciating Vishwamitra a lot, and he started telling him that I'll do anything and everything for you. So words are unretractable arrows, and once they're released, it cannot be taken back. So we have to be very careful of what we speak. And then we saw how Vishwamitra and Dashrath had totally differences of vision. So because of the clash between two distinct mindsets, so Vishwamitra saw Ram from the perspective of a teacher, and Dashrath saw Ram from the perspective of a parent. So there was a clash between love and growth. So the parent wanted love, comfort, and the teacher wanted growth and discipline. And then we saw how Vishwamitra, when he realizes that Dashrath is just not ready to budge, he gets angry. And here is a perfect use of anger. This is called as constructive anger, where anger can be used to wake up somebody who is selfish. And then we saw how Vashishta interferes between Dashrath and Vishwamitra, and comes to a conclusion. So we saw how Vashishta helps Dasharath understand that this is the plan of the Lord. So seeing the plan of God is the lesson that we learned from this. And then we saw how Dasharath, after hearing Vashishta, he decided to let go. And he agreed to send Ram. So we saw the lesson that we learned is that sometimes to grow in your spiritual life, you need to let go of your attachments. And then we also finally concluded by saying how Vishwamitra transfers knowledge to Ram and Lakshman. He gives the Bala and Atibala mantra to Ram. And then Ram, after receiving this knowledge, what he does is he serves his master, serves his spiritual teacher with humility. So the ascetic pride of knowledge can be diluted with humility. And then we finally saw how Vishwamitra, for the first time in his life, he is learning to give. And here we saw the lesson, which is the first law, which is known as the law of sharing. So, having said all this, we will continue today in discussing the story of the Ramayan from this point onwards. So, at this point of time, the sun is setting, is becoming late in the night. First time in the life of Ram and Lakshman, they are away from home in the forest, alone with an unknown sage. And so you can imagine how uncomfortable it could be for somebody who is born in a life of luxury, who is born in a life of comforts, and experiencing discomfort for the first time. So somehow or the other, Vishwamitra, he makes a small makeshift type of, like to test? Satyarambo? Like to test sound? So Ram and Lakshman settle down, and Vishwamitra makes a small bed of grass for Ram and Lakshman to take rest. Immediately, the first thing that we realize from this is that these two people, Ram and Lakshman, though they are born in the most comfortable situation, experiencing the most comfortable situation in life, they are still flexible. How many times in our life, when we have to go through a little adjustment, we are just not ready to budge? So many times you go to a restaurant, so many times you go to a hotel to stay, so many times you go to somebody else's house to stay, and one small thing doesn't work the exact way you want it to work. How much are we flexible to adjust? So one of the qualities of a good leader is trained to be flexible, trained to be happy in whatever situation life puts him in. So Vishwamitra, in addition to trying his best to make Ram and Lakshman comfortable, just by giving grass, he decided to do something else. This is something this person has never ever done in his life. So you can imagine how tough it is for a person like Vishwamitra, a hardened, tough sage, to do. He started speaking sweet words of comfort to Ram and Lakshman. Soothing words of love are more gratifying than luxuries which are given without love. So many times in life, we experience luxuries. But when the luxuries are given without love, it's a very big difference than simple things given with love. Suppose you go to somebody's house and somebody serves you food with anger and then spits on the food. This is like the best food available, 54 items in it, but then serving it with complete anger. So even if it is the most tasty food, you're not going to be comfortable. Somebody throws a plate in front of you and says, "Khale, tumhare baap ka kya jata hai?" You might find the best food, but how enthusiastic are you to eat, right? So, the difference between eating when you are served with love. I went to a village one time, and this was a very, very simple village, Jaisalmer. And I stayed in somebody's house, one room practically. And they fed me chapatis. I still remember the taste of those chapatis. You know why? It's not that I have never eaten chapatis. It's just that the simplicity of the setting and the love in which they were serving, that was fascinating. So the point is that Vishwamitra was trying to speak sweet words to Ram and Lakshman that made them more comfortable than probably the luxuries that many people could have given them. So, this is the first time in Vishwamitra's life where he is speaking softly with children. Till now, he has never done that. Every person has a soft side in him or her. But most of the times, the desire to project oneself as a tough person, the desire to project oneself as a strong person is so much there that you tend to think that the soft side is a weakness. So many people feel that if I show my soft side, people will consider this to be a weakness. And therefore, they always prefer to show the tough side. So, Vishwamitra, for the first time, he could show his soft side because the setting in which he had to show, nobody was going to judge him at all. And here, he was happy enough and comfortable enough to show his soft side. The night passed and it was sunrise. Vishwamitra had got up much earlier, much before sunrise, gone and done all his oblations, gone and done his morning duties. And he comes back and he sees that Ram and Lakshman are still sleeping. Children, naturally, they sleep more. So, Vishwamitra, he came a little before sunrise and he looked at the face of Ram and Lakshman for the first time. This was the first time in Vishwamitra's life he was looking at the beauty of Lord Ram's face early in the morning. All of you all must be aware that we have Mangal Aarti early in the morning at 4:30, 5 in the morning, So many people wonder, why do we have Mangal Aarti so early in the morning, I mean, you could do it at 7 o'clock or something, right? It's a good enough time. There is a reason. Because when the Lord wakes up, the beauty of the face of the Lord, the beauty of the personality of the Lord, just when he gets up, that beauty is unparalleled. Actually, in the material world, somebody who sleeps and wakes up, you don't want to see that person. I mean, I travel in trains so many times, and people are embarrassed early in the morning, I can very clearly see embarrassment in people's faces, right? Why? Because the beauty of a person early in the morning is not so good. But in the case of the Supreme Lord, it's exactly the opposite. The beauty of the face of the deities, of the Lord, first thing in the morning is the most amazing thing. Therefore, rather than seeing all crazy faces, devotees prefer to see the beautiful face of the Lord first thing in the morning. And this was the first time in the life of Vishwamitra that he was getting to see the face of Lord Ram first thing in the morning. And you know what he remembered? He did not remember all the austerities that he has done. He did not remember all the knowledge that he had. He remembered Kaushalya, the mother of Lord Ram. In fact, this was the only thing he remembered. Why? Because Kaushalya, the mother of Lord Ram, she had the fortune of seeing the face of Lord Ram every day in the morning. And this was only the first time that Vishwamitra was seeing. So out of that kind of appreciation for Kaushalya, he started remembering her. A hardened sage remembering a woman first thing in the morning. And then he started, from his heart came out a shloka. From his heart came out a poem, very spontaneously. And this is one of the famous poems that is there in the Vishnu Sahasranam. Kaushalya Supraja Rama Purva Sandhya Pravartate Uttisht Narshardula Kartavyam Devamanikam. He didn't speak the entire poem in the beginning. He only spoke the word Kaushalya for about 1 hour. That's the only word that came out from his mouth. You know why? Because he went into a trance, practically in an ecstatic mood, because he's remembering this personality. So, then, when he came out of the trance, he completed the whole verse. So this verse literally what it means is that Kaushalya Supraja Rama. He is saying, my dear Ram, who is the darling of Mother Kaushalya, and how fortunate is Kaushalya to have begotten you as her son. He says, Purva Sandhya Pravartate. The sun has already risen. And Uttishta Narashar Dula. The sun has already risen. Now you, O king of human beings, Narashar Dula, the king of living entities, you get up, you rise up. And then he says, Kartavyam Devamanikam. Rise up and do what? Not drink bed tea, not read newspapers, That's not the first thing you do in the morning. Unfortunately, that's the first thing we do in the morning. So Vishwamitra is saying, Kartavya Devamanikam. Get up and do those duties that are assigned to us by God. Now, we stop here for a moment and think why Vishwamitra spoke this. This is the difference between the path of devotion and the path of austerities. Vishwamitra, so far in his life, has been following the path of austerities, following the path of strong heartedness, following the path of a hard life of an ascetic. So Vishwamitra, for the first time in his life, he saw the greatness of somebody else. The path of devotion naturally allows you to see the greatness of others and lack of our own greatness, lack of our own, progress. But the path of austerity is, what it does is that it cripples the feeling of greatness of others and one basks in self-glory. One always thinks about himself or herself. So the path of austerity and the path of devotion, for the first time in Vishwamitra's life, he thought about the greatness of somebody else. Can you imagine what a difference it is for Vishwamitra in his consciousness? This brings us to the second law, which is known as the law of dependence. The law of dependence, it tells us that one's real strength lies in realizing the strength of others and realizing the strength of God. So, from the burden of being an exclusive controller, Vishwamitra always felt that he is in control of his life. He doesn't need anybody else. He doesn't need any other strength. He has his own strength. He has his own abilities to control his senses. He has his own abilities to find God, find his perfection in life. He doesn't need anybody else. He doesn't need to appreciate anybody else. For the first time, Vishwamitra, from experiencing the burden of being an exclusive controller, he experiences the freedom of accepting higher powers. When you feel that I am in control, it's actually a burden. The word Namaha, when we chant, many of the pranam mantras, we use the word Namaha. The word Namaha, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains in the Bhagavad, in the commentary to the Srimad Bhagavatam, he says the word Namaha actually talks about essentially, one concept. It says that when we think that everything is happening because of us, I am responsible for everything that is happening in my life, what really happens is that there is a huge burden on our head because we are responsible for becoming successful. But when we take shelter of higher powers and we use the word Namaha, it actually means I am not taking shelter of myself, but I am depending on somebody else. So when we have faith that we deposit in higher powers, that faith can help us transcend so many of the limitations that we have with our own abilities. For the first time in the life of Vishwamitra, he experienced what it feels like depending on somebody else, what it feels like appreciating somebody else, what it feels like by being inspired by somebody else. Then the word kartavyam devamanikam is a very interesting sentence. Vishwamitra says, Kaushalya supraja Rama purva sandhya pravartate. He asks Ram to get up and he says, Uttishra narashardula kartavyam devamanikam. Everyone needs reminders of one's duties. The natural tendency in this world is to lose inspiration. The natural tendency in this world to lose focus. Here, Vishwamitra is reminding Ram that you have to get up and do your duties. Why? Because you are Narashardula. You are an ideal that world is going to follow. If you don't do your duties, what will be the inspiration for others to do it? So basically, Vishwamitra is trying to inspire Ram to get up. So the natural instincts in this world is that one forgets one's responsibilities and becomes lazy. This is the natural instincts in the world. In our bramachari ashram, we have a rule that we have to get up at 4:20. We have to sign, at 5:47 in the morning. I'll tell you, you ask any of the brahmacharis, if this rule was not there, what would happen? Impossible. It's just impossible to be self-inspired for a long duration of time. So, the job of a true guide is to keep the lethargic mind focused on the goal. So, Ram and Lakshman, they were supposed to be tiger among men, Narashar Dula. But, what is the meaning of being tiger among men? It means that they are supposed to set the ideal examples for the world to follow. So, determination to go against the currents of this world, it requires inspiration. I was on the banks of Mother Ganga a few days back, in Rishikesh, and the currents of the Ganga are so powerful. We were watching people trying to do some rafting, and we saw how people are struggling when they had to go against the current. When they had to go with the current, they had to do nothing. They had to just sit there. And automatically, the raft would go. But then, when they had to take a turn or to go even 1 inch against the current, we could see the struggle. Because anything when you're going against the current, it needs struggle. So, the bee, the bumblebee, the body structure of the bumblebee is such that technically, analytically, logically speaking, the bee is not supposed to fly. Because the size of the body of the bee, the weight of the body of the bee, and the proportion of the wings, the strength of the wings cannot handle that weight. Impossible. But the bumblebee doesn't know that. Logic, if you try to use it too much, then many times you get paralyzed with logic. So, Vyavasatmika buddhi ekeha kurunandana. When you have determination, strong determination, you attract higher powers. So, we find in the history, the story of Chetak, the horse of Rana Pratap. The fascinating story of Chetak, the reason why the story is still recounted is because the horse, was trying to do something completely against what it is supposed to do, logically, right? Therefore, we still get inspired from those stories. So similarly, when anyone struggles against the currents, against the natural system of life, such a person needs inspiration constantly. There was one boy actually, studying in a Gurukul, and when he was, come in the front, there's a chair over here. So when he was studying in the Gurukul, this boy, he lost his inspiration. This boy felt that I am so useless. I just can't study. I just can't focus. I'm not able to retain any data, any knowledge. So many children feel like that. So, when this boy, he decided, I'm going to quit. I can't handle the study. He left the Gurukul, walked towards his home. On his way, he came across a well from which there were ladies who were drawing water. And he stopped for a minute and observed minutely what they were doing. They were drawing water from the well, but along with drawing water from the well, on the tip of the well, there was marks of ropes. And the strong, hard stone had practically, carved, and, it gave way to that rope. Because he realized constantly, because this rope is being pulled and the stone is getting, torn apart, because of which there was a small, impression into the stone. The boy realized, if such a hard stone can develop an impression because of repeatedly doing the same thing, I'm not so dull. He said, let me go and try again. Eventually, this boy became one of the greatest scholars in his times. Just because he realized that inspiration that I develop to keep doing the same thing again and again, that inspiration keeps me going. So Ram, Lakshman, they got up, they performed their morning duties being inspired by Vishwamitra, and then the journey continued. The 7 laws that we are seeing in this series is based on 7 stories that come on the path. So here, the first episode was when they learned from the Bala and Ati Bala mantras, the knowledge transfer. And the second part was what they learned from Vishwamitra, personally learned by depending on Kaushalya. Now, both of them and Vishwamitra, they reached a very beautiful hermitage. It's a very different type of hermitage. There was nobody living there. But in spite of nobody living there, that hermitage looked very important to Ram. So Ram stopped and asked Vishwamitra. This was a hermitage on the confluence of Ganga and Sarayu, when both the rivers coincided. At the confluence, this hermitage was there. Beautiful looking hermitage. So Ram asked Vishwamitra that whose hermitage is this? So Vishwamitra said, there is a story behind this hermitage. He said, long back, Lord Shiva used to reside here and he used to perform tapasya there. And while Lord Shiva was performing his tapasya, one day, Kamadev, Cupid, he came to disturb Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva, he realized what Cupid is trying to do, and he burnt him to ashes. In fact, not even ashes remained. He burnt him to nothingness. Whatever it means, He just didn't exist anymore. So the lesson that we learn is that lust only exists in the mind. It makes the prospect of physical pleasure intense. But actually, it doesn't really have a substance. From that day onwards, Kamadev got another name. His name became Ananga. Anga means body. Ananga means somebody who doesn't have a body. That means lust actually doesn't have a physical presence. It's only at the platform of the mind. So, the curiosity of the mind develops certain curiosities. If I do this, I will develop this kind of pleasure. I will have experienced this kind of pleasure. For your kind information, those pleasures don't really exist. It's only on a mental platform, right? So, Ram, he represents dharma. Kama has to always be aligned with dharma. If kama is unaligned with dharma, these 4 qualities, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, these 4 are there existing. So, dharma, artha, kama and moksha. If kama is not in between dharma and moksha, artha and kama is not between dharma and moksha, what will happen is that these 2 can create havoc. Artha and kama have to be within the boundaries of dharma and moksha. So Ram represents dharma and Kamadev represents kama over here. So indicating that Ram has to first be before Kama. We will try to understand this concept a little deeper when we learn how to deal with desires. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna speaks a very interesting verse in the second chapter. He says, Prajayahati yada kaman sarvan partha manogatan atmani evat manatushta sthita pragya tadochite. He says, when a man gives up his desires for sense gratification, which arise out of mental concoction. Now it's a very interesting word. Sarvan partha manogatan. Where does desire originate? Does desire originate in the senses? If I see something beautiful, has the desire originated in my eyes? If I want to taste something beautiful, really delicious, does the desire originate in the tongue? If I want to hear a good music, does the desire originate in the ear? No. Where does desire originate? Desire originates in the mind. Manogatan. So Krishna says, Sarvan Partha Manogatan. So basically, it means that Kama, it originates, desires originate in the mind. The word Kama not necessarily only means lust. It also means desires. All kinds of desires. So how does a Sthita Pragya deal with such desires? The mind has a very interesting phobia. It has a phobia of accepting and rejecting. Sankalpa, Vikalpa. Sometimes it wants something. After you get it, it says, I don't want this. I want something else. It typically happens with everybody. You buy a particular dress. As soon as you have bought it, immediately the mind tells you are a fool. Till you have bought it, the mind tells you, if you don't buy this, you are a fool. And as soon as you buy it, the mind tells you, you are a fool. Why did you buy this? You should have just turned one time to the right. You would have seen something better, right? This is the property of the mind. Sankalpa, Vikalpa. Accepting and rejecting. So, when our decisions, when our desires are born out of the mind, manogataha, then such desires will always create a havoc. Because one time you will feel like having the desire, after 10 minutes you will say, I don't want it. After 10 minutes you will say, I want it. So this goes on and on and on. So basically, Krishna says, Vihaya karaman yah sarvan pumam sharati nispriha nirmamo nirangaro shishantam adhigachyati. So what one has to do? Does it mean that one has to give up all desires? कुछ नहीं, नेति नेति नेति, मुझे ये भी नहीं चाहिए, मुझे वो भी नहीं चाहिए, कुछ नहीं चाहिए, आंख बंद करके सो जाएंगे, कुछ इच्छा ही नहीं जागेगा. That doesn't happen. The mind is within. So desires are going to come. Basically what we need to do is we need to access or catch only those desires that are going to elevate us in our spiritual life, that are going to uplift us in our spiritual consciousness. So therefore, Krishna says the difference between a Sthita Pragya and a Sthita Agya is that a Sthita Pragya knows which desires to accept and which not to accept. A Sthita Pragya knows where to draw the line. But a Sthita Agya, he doesn't know. Because he just listens to whatever the mind says. How do you control your mind? How do you determine which desire to accept and which desire not to accept? One testing point. Is that desire going to help you grow in your spiritual life or no? If the desire is not going to help you grow, immediately abandon it. And if it is going to help you grow, accept it. It's not a desire that is going to be harmful to you. Dealing with desires is a very tough thing. One thing we remember when we deal with desires is that desires, when fulfilled, they can intensify more. And desires, when not fulfilled, they can frustrate a lot. These are desires that are material in nature. I'm going to show you one video about how sometimes we have such strong desires in our heart, and our desires are so strong that we do not want anybody else to get the benefit. We want to be the only person to derive the benefit from it. Everybody else thrown out. But many times when we allow other people to be thrown out so that we are happy, at a later point of time we realize we become miserable. So I'm going to show you a video. This is about 2 or 3 minutes. But this video will lead us to a very important law, which is the third law, I guess, right? So we'll see this video and then we will discuss. Just one small request before we start the video. All of you all kindly either switch off your mobile phones or put them on silent mode so the people around you don't get disturbed and don't get, don't lose their focus. This leads us to what is known as the law of balance. We need to balance selfishness with selflessness, the need to take with the desire to give. So the law of balance, it takes us from the narrow world of self-satisfaction to the broad world of self-content. So basically, here we saw in this story how Kamadev, which Cupid, represents lust, represents desire. The desire to fulfill one's own wants, one's own interests. Not caring for the interests of others, not caring for the desires of others. My interest, my needs take over dominance over everybody else's needs. That's what selfishness is about. So selfishness leads to discontent. No matter how much one has, one hankers for more and more and more. I always tell the story of this king who, like this bird, always felt that my aim in life is to accumulate as much as possible. So the more I have, the more I'll be happy. One sage is trying to explain to this king a lot about how that doesn't work. It's not always that way. But this king never understood. Finally, the sage decided to give him an experiential learning. And the sage brought a vessel. And he told the king, my dear king, just do one thing for me. Fill this vessel with a little bit of wealth. I'll be happy. I don't want anything else. And I'll never ever bother you again. So king felt, I anyway wanted to get rid of this man. And just by giving him a little, if he's going to go away, I'm happy. So he told the guards, put some wealth in his vessel. The guards put something. The vessel was empty. The sage said, can you just fill this up? The king told the guard, just fill it up. The guards got a good chunk of wealth and put it in. Still empty. The king said, come on, what are you doing? Fill it up. They kept getting more and more and more. Soon the entire treasury of the king was over. Still the vessel was empty. Now the king got bewildered. He said, how is it possible? My entire treasury is over. The sage said, this vessel is not made up of ordinary metal. It is made up of the mind. How much ever you put into the mind will never be full. The mind will never say, bas ho gaya. The mind will always say, ye dil mange more. And whenever the mind says, ye dil mange more, if you feel that you fill it up, it will be satisfied. No. It will just keep saying the same thing. So, people are selfish due to the wrong understanding that if their desires are met, they will be happy forever. The urge to take must be balanced by the urge to give. Fulfilling our own needs is important. But along with fulfilling our own needs, we also have to learn to fulfill the needs of others. So we have to shift from an egocentric existence to egocentric existence. It brings your world to a very small world, which is centered around yourself. This is the world of bhokta, enjoyer. So the previous story where we saw about the law of dependence highlights the concept of being a controller, where a sage like Vishwamitra was thinking that I don't need to depend on anybody else. I have my own power, I have my own ability, I can perform austerities and I will go ahead. That was taken care by the law of dependence. And this is a law which is known as the law of balance, which takes care of the concept of being an enjoyer. The concept of being an enjoyer means only me, nobody else. So we need to learn the law of balance. So that's what Vishwamitra learned at this point of time. Very interestingly, the journey of Vishwamitra with Ram and Lakshman along this whole path is not just an adventurous journey. It's a journey of the elevation of Vishwamitra also. With every step in the journey, not only Ram and Lakshman are learning so many things, but Vishwamitra himself as a spiritual seeker is learning so many things. Therefore, for those who didn't know this, the first Kanda of the Ramayan is called as the Balakanda. Balakand, generally most people think it refers to the childhood pastimes of Lord Ram. And yesterday, as I told you, how many verses are there in the Balakand about the childhood of Lord Ram? Just 10 verses. Now just because of 10 verses, you cannot name 1,000 other verses as Balakand. Who is the Bala in the Balakand? The Bala in the Balakand is Vishwamitra Muni. He is a child. In the beginning of the Balakand, he is a child in his devotion. And by the end of the Balakand, he is a mature adult in his devotion. That's what Balakand is. So these are the laws that Vishwamitra is learning as he progresses. Therefore, this theme is called Laws of Progressive Living. As we want to progress in our spiritual life and also in our material life, we need to learn these laws to go ahead. The three sit on a boat and ferry across the Ganga, discussing so many stories on the way. At some point of time, they come across a forest, which is extremely dreadful. A completely uninhabited forest. No trees. Trees are there, just physical structures. No leaves, no fruits, nothing. The forest was so hot. The forest was so parched practically. Cracks on the land. the cracks were so huge that practically elephants could go in. And when Ram and Lakshman saw this kind of a parched forest and the kind of heat that they were experiencing, immediately both of them chanted Bala and Atibala mantras. And as soon as they chanted the mantras, the forest was there all around, but nothing was happening to them. The concept of mantra means things are not going to change around you. You will be unaffected by the things around you. That's what mantras do to a person. So, Ram asked Vishwamitra, how did the forest become like this? Then Vishwamitra told the story of this forest. He said, long back, these forests were very, very good. I'll explain to you the story. He said, many centuries back, Indra, the king of the demigods, he killed a demon who was also a Brahmana, great devotee named Vritrasur. And when Indra killed Vritrasur, he became affected by the sin of killing a great devotee, a Brahmana. And because the sin was affecting Indra, he was running all over. And two problems originated in Indra's life. First one was that Indra was feeling constantly hungry. And the second thing was that Indra was dirty, absolutely contaminated and dirty. So Indra was running from place to place, trying to cleanse himself, trying to satisfy his hunger. And then finally he came to this forest. These were twin forests which existed close by. And in one of the forests, he ate and his hunger was satisfied. And the other forest, he cleansed himself, his servants came and helped him cleanse himself, and his dirt was cleaned. So because of that, one of the forests came to be known as Malada. Malada means the place where Indra's dirt was cleansed. And the other forest came to be known as Karusha. Karusha means the place where his hunger was satisfied. And as soon as Indra experienced satisfaction of his hunger and cleansing of his body, he gave a blessing to these forests. He blessed this forest to become prosperous. And both these forests became extremely prosperous. Prosperity that one experiences in life need not be the result of our own effort, but it may be the result of somebody else's silent blessing. So many people in our lives, we may not know who is blessing us. And because of the blessing that we experience from somebody else, we may experience prosperity. So we should never think that prosperity is because of my own endeavor. I am the maker of my own destiny. There are so many people who help us create our destiny. So Indra, he was relieved, he blessed the forest and went away. But then, basically, when you relieve somebody else of their burden, surely blessings will come on you. So these two forests, knowingly and unknowingly, they helped Indra come out of his suffering. So Indra blessed them. So Indra went away. Much later, there was a Yaksha whose name was Suketu. And Suketu, he had a daughter whose name was Tataka. And Tataka, Suketu married Tataka to a demon whose name was Sunda. So from Tataka and Sunda came two sons. One whose name was Maricha and the other whose name was Subahu. Now these two, this happy family, hum do hamare do, they were living there in that forest and they were just not happy themselves, but they were happy giving unhappiness to others. So Sunda, one time he went to, they would regularly harass sages, they would regularly beat up people and all that. One day, Sunda made a mistake. He went to the wrong sage. He went to the ashram of Agastya Muni, who happened to be, residing there and performing his tapasya. And Sunda went and started, irritating him. Agastya, he didn't retaliate too much, he only burnt him down. And when, the wife of Sunda, Tataka and Subahu and Maris, these three of them, they saw the injustice done to their husband. They said he was just innocently trying to play, and what the sage did, burnt him down. How so unfair. And then Tataka and Marich and Subahu, they came running to Agastya to kill him. Agastya looked at them and said, "You all look like man-eating animals." And he cursed them. "You all become man-eating, Rakshasas. Terrible looking, huge figures." So immediately, as a result of the curse of Agastya, these three, Tataka became a huge demoness. I'll explain to you about how huge she became later. And then Marich and Subahu became powerful demons, Rakshasas themselves. So Marich and Subahu, they shifted their residence. They went for higher prospects to Ravana's kingdom. They got a job offshore. And Tataka remained in that forest with only one desire: revenge. Revenge for her husband's death. And she started terrorizing the entire place. Agastya Muni went away, and then the whole forest became a completely desolated place. And the whole forest became filled with so much heat, filled with so much of, anger, and practically all the trees lost their leaves. And that's the forest that Rama and Lakshman were seeing now. The lesson that we learn is that anger converts a prosperous heart into a parched one, which is filled with thorns of envy and devoid of fruits of love. Two stories we saw leading to two opposite results. Indra was served by the forest. Indra blessed the forest for prosperity. And Tataka was, angered, and that anger resulted in Tataka destroying the forest completely. So in life, curses and blessings are constantly happening all the time on us. Which one we invite to our life, it depends on us. The Mahabharata war is essentially filled with curses and blessings. The Pandavas, the only thing they accumulated constantly was blessings. And the Kauravas, the only thing they accumulated constantly was curses. Even before the war, the whole Bhagavad Gita was spoken and the war was going to begin. The conches had been blown and everything was ready. Yudhishthira Maharaj got down from his chariot and started walking towards the other side. The entire Pandava army was confused. What is he doing? He is like Gandhiji, he can do anything. So Bhima especially was really, really in anxiety because, they worked so hard for this result, and then now Yudhishthira Maharaj. So Krishna said, "Don't worry. Yudhishthira Maharaj is playing a master stroke. Just wait and watch." So Yudhishthira Maharaj just walked into the army of the enemies, straight to Bhishma. He fell at the feet of Bhishma and he asked for blessings. As soon as he fell at the feet of Bhishma, Bhishma said, "I bless you that you'll become victorious." Duryodhana was standing and what's happening, This fellow is supposed to be on our side and he's giving blessings to the other side. Bhishma said, "If you had not come to me now, I would have cursed you. But because you have come, I, allow you to be victorious." And then Yudhishthira Maharaj asked him, "Please give me only one benediction." Bhishma said, "Ask whatever you want." He said, "Please tell me how you will die." Interesting. And then Bhishma told, and then he went to Dronacharya. Exactly the same thing. Took his blessings and asked him what is the secret of how to kill him. And then he went to Kripacharya, took his blessings. Then he went to Shalya, took his blessings and came back peacefully. Accumulating blessings. Success in life need not only be result of endeavor. Success in life also is a result of accumulating unlimited blessings. In life, do we ever think that one of the causes of success is accumulating blessings? Many times we feel that stamping over people's heads is the cause of success. Without realizing from below, so many curses are coming on us. Vishwamitra and Ram and Lakshman, they went ahead. Now this was a very sensitive time in Ram's life. Vishwamitra told Ram that he was explaining about Tataka. Tataka still lives in this forest. So Ram started thinking. Vishwamitra knew what Ram is thinking because he is his guru, he is his teacher, he is wise. Ram was thinking, the first demon I am going to kill in this incarnation has to be a woman? Why me? Sometimes even God has to think like this, why me? So, interestingly, in Krishna's life and in Ram's life, both of them, the first demon they killed is a woman. Krishna, he doesn't have so many problems. He doesn't think so much as Ram, Krishna, when Putana came, he just closed his eyes and killed her. But Ram, he thinks a lot. Why? Because he is Maryada Purushottam. Anushtan Pradhan. Anushtan Pradhan means a person who's teaching us how to discriminate the right from the wrong. So, one of the qualities of a leader is to live and practice life according to principles. So sometimes a leader has to sacrifice his principles also. So here in Ram's life, two principles, two roles collided. One role was he had to respect women, and the other role was he had to prevent torture to innocent people as a leader. So now between the two roles that he was playing, which role was more important? Naturally, preventing torture to hundreds of people, right? So now Ram was not able to handle this. He was thinking, is there any other way of dealing with it? Vishwamitra told him that don't think Tataka is an ordinary woman. And he started explaining stories from the past. He said, Tataka practically has no womanly virtues. And she has violated all the dharmas possible. And Vishwamitra started quoting stories of people in the past who have killed women. He said, Indra killed a woman whose name was Kumati. Her name originally was Sumati, but because she started torturing so many people, her name became Kumati. And then Vishwamitra started telling about how Lord Vishnu himself killed a woman whose name was Khyati, who was the wife of Bhrigu Maharshi. The reason is because she was supporting the demons. Of course, the interesting thing in this particular story is that point of time, Bhrigu cursed Vishnu that because you have killed my wife, you will have to take 10 births in this earth. And that's why one of the reasons for the 10 incarnations. And Ram happened to be one of the incarnations. So Vishwamitra is telling the same story to him. So Ram, he was thinking, analyzing the situation. Ram had 3 authorities to fall back on. All of us also have the same 3 authorities to fall back on every time we need to take a decision in our life. Especially the complicated decisions of life. As complicated as this. The first authority that Ram had was Dasharath Maharaj, his own father. And what did Dasharath tell him? Dasharath told him, listen to whatever Vishwamitra says. So that authority very clearly told him to follow Vishwamitra. And what Vishwamitra is telling him? Vishwamitra is telling him, kill her. So 2 authorities are telling the same thing. So Ram is thinking because he is verifying with the 3rd authority. Which is the 3rd authority? Scriptures. Do the scriptures also allow such killing? Only when Ram had aligned all the 3 authorities and decided that yes, there is an alignment between the 3, then he said, I'm going to go ahead now. All of us in our lives, we have 3 authorities to depend on. Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. Guru is a spiritual master who gives us direction, instructions. Sadhus are great sages. Great, not just sages in the terms of wearing the saffron cloth, sages in terms of having the right wisdom. If you don't understand whether what your guru is telling you is right or wrong, take the guidance from the teachers. Find out whether you have understood what the guru is telling you properly or not. And then, if both the authorities are right, or if at least one of them is right, you have a 3rd authority to refer to, which is the Shastra. So this triangle, Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, always helps us take the right decisions. Now Ram was ready. He realized, I am not wrong. I am going to kill her. Before that, he twanged his bow. He just took his bow and pulled the string and released it. And the sound that the twanging of the bow of Ram created, the entire forest shook violently. The entire forest shook violently. Mountains were moving. Very far away, Tataka, she got up from her slumber. she realized somebody has come who's challenging her authority. And Tataka, she woke up and she started running towards where Lord Ram was. There's a very interesting description of how Tataka looked. For those who like sci-fi novels and for those who like, some kind of adventurous fighting with, powerful demons and Star Wars and all that, this is a good one. Tataka, the description of Tataka was that she was humongous, huge. She wore a garland around her neck. The garland was made up of elephants. One elephant, the trunk of one elephant tied to the tail of the other elephant. The trunk of the second elephant tied to the tail of the third elephant. Like that, There's a necklace of 108 elephants around her neck. She had her earring, which was made up of a couple of elephants. And in her spear, there were string of animals. There was a lion hanging, there was an elephant hanging, there were so many animals hanging. And this was the kind of person Tataka was. And when she came running towards where Ram was, every step that she took, the moment she would step in one place, there would be a lake created when she would remove her leg. So as she was running, she was creating so many lakes. So you should call her, if Bombay needs wells to be dug, So Tataka, she came running and she started shouting on the top of her voice and trying to attack Ram and Lakshman. Ram, he started shooting arrows and defending all her attacks. At a certain point of time, Ram realized this is getting too much. So he shot 2 arrows and chopped off her hands. Vishwamitra was thinking, why is he wasting his time and my time? Then Vishwamitra realized that Ram still is not fully convinced that he has to kill. He's still thinking, if I remove her hands, maybe she will stop fighting. Maybe she will realize that she is wrong. Maybe she will change. This is hope for us. When God gives us second chances, when God gives us time to transform, time to rectify, that is the hope for us. The kindness of God is the hope for fallen people like us. So then Tataka started disappearing and started throwing stones and different things from different places. Vishwamitra really became desperate. He told Ram, my dear Ram, the sun is setting. And as soon as the sun sets, this lady, her power will become unlimited more and you will never be able to kill her. And then Ram realized that he has to do something. She disappeared in the meanwhile and she started throwing stones from all directions. They couldn't find out where she was. And finally, she made one mistake. You know what the mistake she made? She laughed. And as soon as she laughed, Ram shot an arrow in that direction and he killed her. And she fell down dead. As soon as Tataka was dead, the first thing, and there's a very interesting explanation of how the arrow of Ram hit Tataka. The explanation is given is that the arrow of Ram pierced the chest of Tataka and came out from the other side. Just like good advice enters into the ears of a fool and comes out from the other side. Very interesting analogy. So, when Tataka fell down dead, Ram came to Vishwamitra, to his teacher, and fell at his feet. And he begged forgiveness from Vishwamitra. Why did he have to beg forgiveness from Vishwamitra? He said, I am sorry, I did not follow your instructions instantly. I hesitated for one moment. Because I hesitated for one moment, therefore I am asking forgiveness from you. Vishwamitra was very happy with the attitude of Ram because he realized here is the perfect leader. Because he doesn't take decisions just because somebody is telling him to do it. He takes decisions with discrimination, with a lot of contemplation. So both the sides we can learn something. We can learn from Ram that he had the ability to see his own fault. You will find this repeatedly in the Ramayan. A person who is faultless, able to see his own faults, it shows that people like us who are full of faults at least should be able to spot one or two. Vishwamitra, on the other hand, he teaches that though he was right, he was still able to see the good in Ram. Though his disciple was not following him, he was still able to see that the disciple had the quality of discrimination. So both of them had something to teach us. So basically, essentially, we should learn when to show sensitivity and when to take disciplinary action. Sometimes leadership confuses the two. When it is time to be sensitive, we take disciplinary actions, and when it is time to be actually disciplinary, that time we become sensitive. This balance is very difficult to achieve. And this balance is what Ramayana is about. There's a very interesting story about how sometimes leaders can be insensitive to take decisions. One time there was a robber who had climbed a wall, and he was robbing, and somehow the wall broke and he fell down and he died. The next day, the wife of the robber went to the king of that area and she complained, "My husband died because the wall fell down." The king, he didn't ask what the husband was doing in the middle of the night on top of the wall. He said, "Who built the wall? Get him over here." The mason came. He said, "I built the wall." The king said, "Why did you make a wall that fell down?" The mason said, "I do the same thing every day. Today, the person who mixed cement, he put little more water. Therefore, it became a little slippery." The king said, "Get the fellow who made the cement. Who got the water." The man came and he said, "I get exactly the same pot of water every day. The fellow who made the potter, he made a little bigger size today." So they got the potter. And the king asked the potter, "Why did you make a bigger pot?" He said, "I was looking at one lady standing, and because she was standing in front of me, the pot became a little bigger." So the king said, "Get that lady over here. Who told you to stand in front of the potter?" The lady said, "I was standing for my cloth. The laundry man became late." So the king said, "Get the laundry man here. Why did you become late?" So he said, "I went to get my laundry on time just like every day. But today there was a sage who was sitting and he was just not ready to budge." So the king said, "Get the sage over here. Who told him to sit in between?" And the sage was a Mauni Baba, so a silent sage. The king asked him a question, the sage didn't reply. The king said, "Hang him, he's the culprit." So sometimes you don't know what to do. Somebody where you're supposed to be sensitive, you act cruel. And when you're supposed to act cruel, you become sensitive. Even to be compassionate, you need intelligence. I'm going to show you a very small video. It's a 40-second video. But that shows if you don't have intelligence, if you don't have the sensitivity, when to show compassion and when not to show compassion, you'll make a fool of yourself and you'll harm others rather than helping them. This is called the law of awareness. Awareness means knowledge. Basically, knowledge makes an insensitive person sensitive. And the lack of knowledge makes a sensitive person insensitive. This story which we just saw of Tataka is exactly this. Ram was trying to act extremely sensitive, and Tataka was extremely insensitive. Tataka didn't care the pain of others. She didn't care how people felt. She didn't care how much damage she's causing as long as she felt happy. And Ram, on the other hand, he was so sensitive that he was trying to be sensitive to the person who was causing damage to others. So basically, Tataka was ignorant and insensitive and took pleasure in torturing others. And Ram was knowledgeable and sensitive even to the person who was a criminal. Many people in this world don't know what is the meaning of sensitivity. There is this famous story of a French queen, once she was told by her people that the people in the town don't have bread to eat. There's nothing there. She couldn't understand the problem. She told them, if there's no bread to eat, let them eat cake. When there's no bread, where will cake come from? This is insensitivity of leadership. So, there was once a Hyderabad or Nawab of Hyderabad, sorry. Tongue twister. So, this Nawab of Hyderabad, he went to Britain once and he was seeing the systems over there, the British Museum, and he saw somewhere there was an electrocution chamber, where they would electrocute people to death. So the Nawab said, I want a trial. The British officers, they said, come on, there is nobody to electrocute. We don't have any prisoners now. He said, don't worry, take one of my soldiers. And he actually sent one soldier to be electrocuted just so that he wants to see how it works. Insensitivity. So when there is ignorance of the fact that there is higher control above you, one becomes very insensitive to needs of others and to the interests and concerns of others. I'm going to show you another video now. This video will show exactly opposite of what we saw some time back. I showed you something about insensitivity. Now I'm going to show you something about how if one learns to be sensitive to the needs and interests of others, one can become such an amazing human being. Sensitivity is a matter of knowledge of others' suffering. So the concept of the law of awareness is just the fact that if we know what it means to suffer, then we'll also naturally know what it means to be sensitive. So Ram here was trying to be sensitive, and Tataka was trying to be totally insensitive. The three go further, and they reach a river, which is named as Kaushiki. Ram, Lakshman are very inspired to know about this river. They're sitting on a boat, traveling on the river, and Vishwamitra is telling the story of this river. He tells that long back, Brahma had a son whose name was Kusha. And Kusha had a son whose name was Kushanabha. And Kushanabha had 100 daughters. Extremely beautiful princesses. Kushanabha, his 100 daughters one time, they were playing in a garden. And at that point of time, Vayu, the demigod in charge for the wind, he happened to be passing by, and he liked the 100 girls. And he told them that I want to marry you. The 100 girls, they said, we have no problem if our father agrees. You have to ask our father for permission. So, Vayu, he was extremely angry at the girls that they refused his offer. He entered into them because he's wind, and he broke their backs. Vata. Vayu is also within the body as Vata. So he broke all of their backs, broke their spines, and went away. The 100 girls now crippled, backs broken, struggling. Somehow or the other, they reached the palace of their father and they explained the whole thing. The father, Kushanabha, he was extremely hurt by the behavior of Vayu, and he approached a sage whose name was Brahmadatta. And he told this sage to accept his 100 daughters as his wife. Brahmadatta consented, and when the marriage is going to take place, Brahmadatta just touched these girls. And as soon as Brahmadatta touched them, all of them became alright and extremely beautiful again. The lesson that we learn is that inability to realize one's personal agenda, it drives us to break other people's backs, break people's hearts. Vayu, he had an agenda. He wanted the girls to marry him. They didn't agree. And because his agenda was not met, he broke everybody's back and went away. If not me, nobody else. On the other hand, we see Brahmadatta, he actually made a sacrifice of accepting these girls who had broken backs. And when a selfless person, when there's a selfless heart, desires to serve, it can restore beauty. So basically, Kushanabha, of course, the story continues. So Kushanabha, he had another son whose name was Gadi. So these 100 daughters were married and gone. And he had another son whose name was Gadi. And Gadi had 2 children. One was a daughter whose name was Kaushiki, and another was a son whose name was Kaushika. And Kaushiki, this daughter, she was married to a sage whose name was Richika. Don't worry, if you're confused with so many names, it's fine, as long as you understand the essence of the story. So Kaushiki was married to Richika, this sage. So they stayed together for some time, and Richika, after some time, he told Kaushiki that I'm going to Brahmaloka. And he just left, walked away from his home. Kaushiki, she was sad that her husband is just leaving her and going. She started following him. And she became a river and she started following behind him. At some point of time, Richika, he stopped and he told her that, see, you can't come with me to Brahmaloka. Stay here and continue serving society in the form of this river. And Kaushiki remained as a river forever. Vishwamitra was telling the story of Kaushiki to Ram and Lakshman, on a boat while swimming on the river. Ram realized that she had done a tremendous sacrifice to serve society. He was offering his respects to her. That time Vishwamitra told him, Kaushiki is my sister. because my name is Kaushika. So Ram was amazed that a brother sitting on the boat and a sister flowing below the boat in the form of this river, and he realized the similarity between the two. The similarity between the two was that's the lesson that we learn. River quenches thirst, and a sage quenches the thirst for knowledge. So both of them, Ram was able to appreciate. Both the brother and sister, they're serving society in such an amazing way. If you compare the actions of Vayu and you compare the actions of Kaushiki, this girl, it's exactly opposite. Vayu was selfish, and when he did not get reciprocation, he broke the girls' backs, he destroyed them and went away. Kaushiki, she also did not get reciprocation from her husband. But instead of thinking of destroying her husband, she said, if I'm not getting reciprocation from my husband, let me use my propensity and desire to serve society, to serve the world. So, Kaushiki, she, rather than, when her desire was not fulfilled, rather than becoming selfish, she became selfless. Kaushalya in the Ramayan is exactly a similar personality. In the second book, we will find episodes where Dasharath has many wives. Kaushalya was the first wife, but she was the most neglected wife, because Dasharath gave all his attention to Kaikeyi. Kaushalya was feeling neglected, but rather than feeling harmed and rather than feeling, like taking revenge or retaliating or doing something wrong to Kaikeyi, you know what she decided? She adopted thousands of students and she started a Gurukul, and she started serving students in a selfless way. So basically, when people abandon you, people let you down, people, do not reciprocate with your love, you don't need to act in the exact same way. You can act a little higher. That's what selflessness is about. So basically, change doesn't happen automatically. You have to work for change to happen. All of us have so many desires in our heart, and we want life to, transform in a certain way. So, just like if there's a room which is dirty, just by the passage of the time, room is not going to get clean. You have to actually put an effort to make the room clean. So, similarly, the heart is not going to get clean just like that. One has to put a special effort to actually cleanse the heart. That's what spiritual life is about. So here, if you see the story of Kaushiki, this is a story of that extra effort. In not trying to just feel hurt, but rather trying to elevate oneself above these low qualities of the emotions which are negative in nature. She started adopting a higher emotion and trying to uplift herself in a very highly elevated way. Ram and Lakshman now were intensely impressed with Vishwamitra, because now they saw that this family, not just Vishwamitra himself, but his whole dynasty is filled with people who are sacrificing for the sake of the world. And then Ram and Vishwamitra and Lakshman, they reached a very beautiful place. This was the culmination of their journey. Vishwamitra brought Ram and Lakshman just to come here. And they reached this place which was known as Siddhashram. Instantly Ram and Lakshman asked him, what is the story of this? Eagerness to learn is one of the most important requisitives to be able to grow in one's spiritual life. If the eagerness to learn is not there, then how much ever good a teacher is, it's useless. So Ram and Lakshman, they were inspired to learn about this ashram. So Vishwamitra Muni started talking about the Siddhashram. He said, long back, Lord Vishnu meditated here. He said, close by when Lord Vishnu was meditating here, there were two personalities whose name was Kashyapa and Diti. These husband and wife, they were meditating close by, and Lord Vishnu was impressed with their meditation, and he appeared in front of them and asked them for any benediction. And they chose to have Vishnu as their son. They said, we want you as our son. And then Lord Vishnu took an incarnation as Vamanadev, born from Kashyapa and Diti. And eventually Vamanadev, he lived there for some time in the same Siddhashram. Then He delivered Bali, and he came back and lived there in Siddhashram for quite some time. And then Vishwamitra stopped telling the story. And he made a statement. You know what he said? This statement of Vishwamitra tells us what is the next law. Vishwamitra said, my dear Ram, Vishnu was staying here, then Vamanadeva started staying here, and now after a long period of time, I have been staying here. I reside in this place, in this ashram. And now this hermitage Siddhashram belongs to me. And then Vishwamitra said, he told Ram, my dear Ram, this ashram belongs as much to you as it belongs to me. You know why he said that? Because originally the ashram belonged to Ram only. He was Vishnu, he was Vamanadev, he's just come back. And in between, so many people came and stayed there and went away. And now Vishwamitra is staying there and it seems to be his ashram. So Vishwamitra is telling Ram, this ashram doesn't belong to me. I have got you here because this ashram actually belongs to you. So, Bali and Vishwamitra both surrendered to the same person. Bali surrendered to Vamanadev and Vishwamitra surrendered to Ram. Both of them, though they surrendered to the same person, they surrendered in totally two different ways. Bali, Vamanadev had to go to Bali and make him surrender. Create an atmosphere where Bali had no option but to surrender, but to take Sharanagati. He had to elongate his leg and make it so long and all that, he really had to take a lot of trouble. He had to actually take a special incarnation just to deliver this one man. Can you imagine how much trouble the Lord had to take to deliver Bali? And then Bali surrendered. Of course, he got the credit for surrendering. But Vishwamitra surrendered in a different way. Ram didn't come to Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra went to Ram. Ram didn't want to come to Siddhashram. Vishwamitra got him to Siddhashram. And Ram didn't ask him for anything. Vishwamitra kept giving him everything. In the beginning, he gave the Bala Nati Bala mantras. And then, after killing of Tataka, he gave all the missiles that he had, all the weapons that he had, all the divine astras that he had, all of them he handed it over to Lord Ram. So first, he surrendered his knowledge to Lord Ram. Then he surrendered his propensity to enjoy to Lord Ram. Then he surrendered his propensity to control to Lord Ram. And now Vishwamitra is surrendering his propensity to own to Lord Ram. This is known as the law of trusteeship. Ownership does not imply control. Ram owned Siddhashram, but he didn't control Siddhashram. And control does not imply ownership. Vishwamitra controlled Siddhashram, but he didn't own Siddhashram. Proprietorship in this world is illusory, at best temporary. All of us are really not proprietors, but caretakers, trustees. Siddhashram was in the possession of Vishwamitra, but the real proprietor was Lord Ram. Vishwamitra was just a trustee. So the law of trusteeship, you know what it does to us? The law of trusteeship helps us handle any property, including life itself, including our own body, with respect. Why with respect? Because it doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. Anything that belongs to God, we learn to respect it. So the property that we have is not ours, it belongs to God. The body that we have is not ours, it belongs to God. The family that we have is not ours, it belongs to God. If it belongs to God, if it doesn't belong to us, naturally we have to treat it with a lot of respect. So the law of trusteeship teaches us to help us handle any property, including life itself, with respect, because it belongs to God, and with detachment, because it doesn't belong to us. In this world, if just people understand the law of proprietorship, law of trusteeship, so much change can happen. There is an entire court called the Small Causes Court, where brothers are fighting over property, sisters and brothers fighting over property, father and children fighting over property, family disputes over property. Whom does the property belong to? It doesn't belong to any of them anyways. They are there for some time and they go away. Some years, sometimes it's a 11 years lease, sometimes it's 100 years lease. But at some point of time, you have to quit the property, including the body, which is considered to be our property. So basically, nothing belongs to us, including this body. At best, we are caretakers or proprietors or trustees, sorry. It's easy to say this, but it's so difficult to live by this, It's very easy to say everything belongs to God. How difficult it is when it really is going to be taken away. One time there was a discussion between a 1,000 rupee note and a 1 rupee note. So the 1,000 rupee note, very proud. He said, you 1 rupee notes are useless. Your time has gone, We get to go everywhere. We get to go to the cinemas. We get to go to other countries sometimes. We get to go to, some of the richest restaurants. We get to go to so many nice places. The 1 rupee coin said, you cannot go where I go. There's one place that only I go and you can never go there. So the 1,000 rupee note, he got a little offended. He said, impossible, tell me where. He said, temple. Only I go there, So, when it really comes to give, it becomes very difficult. Because the feeling that I am the proprietor is not gone. It's still there, right? So basically, the question is not about giving up everything. The question is about how you handle everything. We're not telling, give up everything to serve God. Abandon everything. Abandon your family, abandon your wealth, abandon your property and give everything to God. That's not the way it is. When you handle them, with what mindset do you handle them? Do you think that everything belongs to me? Do you think that my family belongs to me? It's my family. Do you think this house belongs to me? It's my house. Do you think this wealth belongs to me? It's my wealth. If you think like that, you'll never be able to respect it. Because anything that belongs to you, there is a natural tendency to take it very casually. But anything that belongs to God, there is a natural tendency to treat it with respect. You don't come to a temple and, spread your legs and, lie down, right? You live, you deal with a certain decorum. Why? It's a place where there is respect. If your house is a temple, naturally there will be respect. If people in your family are people who belong to God, there will be naturally respect. So, the law of trusteeship, it just brings us that thought. Now, they are in Siddhashram, the place where they have come for. And now, Vishwamitra Muni gets ready to do the thing he has come for. Vishwamitra Muni tells Ram and Lakshman that now that we are in Siddhashram, I am going to start my sacrifice. This sacrifice is going to last for 6 consecutive days. And as soon as I take the vows of this sacrifice, I will stop speaking. No more question answers. Maun Vrat. And I will observe extreme amount of intense tapasya and I will be performing the sacrifice. For 6 days and 6 nights, you are supposed to guard this yajna. And he tells Ram and Lakshman that be careful. Do not become slack even for one moment. One moment of inattentiveness can destroy the entire sacrifice. So he said, these demons, Subahu and Marich, the sons of Tataka and Sundar, they're going to come. And when they come, they throw all kinds of obnoxious things and yajna gets destroyed. So Vishwamitra told Ram this and he sat for the yajna, taking vow of abstinence from speaking and a vow of abstinence from anger. And Vishwamitra starts the yajna. Ram and Lakshman are guarding the sacrifice. And the way they guard the sacrifice is explained in a very interesting analogy in the Ramayana. It is explained that the yajna kund was like the eyeball. And Ram and Lakshman were like the eyelids. How alert one is depends on how valuable the thing that is being protected is. Because the eyeball is so important, so valuable, therefore the eyelids are so alert. You'll always find, as soon as some noise comes, the first thing that closes your eyelids. Why? Because the eyeball is the most important thing in the body. One of the most important things in the body. So Ram and Lakshman were compared to the eyelids, and the Vishwamitra's yajna was compared to the eyeball, and Ram and Lakshman were guarding the eyeball. And Lakshman was stationary in one place, and Ram would move around the yajna kund. Just like the upper eyelid moves up and down, and the lower eyelid is stationary. So Ram would move around, touch Lakshman, alert him, and then come back. So like that, they were guarding the sacrifice for 6 days and 6 nights. Nothing happened. So most of the times, when you feel कुछ नहीं हो रहा है, ये लोग खामखा ऐसे ही इतना दूर लेके आए हमको, there's a natural tendency to think that we wasted our time. So just when the last offering was going to be poured in the yajna kund, the fire started blazing sky high. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Ram and Lakshman heard a wild shriek. Ram immediately told Lakshman, get ready, the battle is going to start. In fact, their hands were itching for so long. 6 दिन से कुछ हो ही नहीं रहा है. No action, for such a long time. And on top of that, Vishwamitra has given them so many bows and arrows, and they're not able to use them at all. All sages who are harmless practically, So when Ram heard the shriek, he really became excited, and he told Lakshman to become alert. So as soon as these demons, they started shrieking, all the sages, they started running towards Ram and Lakshman in fear. So when Ram and Lakshman saw that the sages were disturbed, the sages came with folded hands in front of Ram and Lakshman. Ram, he held his hand in Abhaya Mudra. Abhaya Mudra is a mudra of fearlessness. And as soon as the sages saw the Abhaya Mudra of Lord Ram, they became very pacified. Things are in control. Just imagine, Ram also had to run away, he had to hide somewhere. So confidence is very important, and confidence comes through postures. So Ram and Lakshman, they assured the sages, and they got ready for the fight. And just when they were becoming ready, these demons, they started throwing all kinds of obnoxious things, blood, mucus, and flesh, and all kinds of things they started throwing into the yajna kund. So Ram and Lakshman created a canopy of arrows on top of the yajna kund, so that none of those things could enter into the yajna kund, splashing on it and falling away. And the demons were getting frustrated. So, and then the demons, they started attacking from all directions. Another very interesting thing was happening. From below, the sages, they were chanting mantras, and the mantras were becoming so intense. And from above, the demons, they were also chanting mantras, but they were chanting galis, So from below, there is positive mantra of different Vedic chants, and from above, there is negative mantra of all kinds of obnoxious chants. And something interesting happened. The demons were trying to descend on the ground because there was a canopy of arrows which they couldn't penetrate. They decided to come down and start attacking from below and throwing things from below. But just as they were coming down, touching the ground, trying to touch the ground, they couldn't come to the ground because the power of the mantras was so powerful that they just couldn't land on the ground. So when negative and positive mantras clash, always the positive mantras are intensely more powerful. Before we discuss a little bit about the effects of mantras, let me discuss a little bit about this particular scene that we are seeing. The analogy, the scene that you are seeing here, which is actually the cover page of the book, is that the sages are compared to good advisors. The yajna kund, the sacrificial arena, is compared to the mind. The good advisors pour good advice into the mind. Just like the sages are pouring clarified butter, ghee into the yajna kund. So the good advisors are constantly trying to fill the mind with good advice. Simultaneously, there are bad advisors. There are people who are trying to throw all kinds of contaminated thoughts, all kinds of obnoxious thoughts into the mind, the demons. So now, you have to decide, the mind is having a certain amount of capacity only. it cannot handle both. And even if both fall in, only one of them will practically take over. So, if the good advisors keep pouring good advice into the mind becomes pure. But if you allow the bad advisors to pour dirt into the mind becomes contaminated and impure. So basically, what did Vishwamitra and the sages do to prevent the Yagyakund from becoming polluted? They got Ram and Lakshman. Who does Ram and Lakshman represent? Ram and Lakshman represents the sharp intelligence. The role of the intelligence is to discriminate which should go into the mind and what should not go into the mind. So naturally Ram and Lakshman realize that as long as positive things are going into the mind, into the Yagyakund, it's fine. And as soon as they saw the negative things, somebody was trying to throw negative things into the mind, they created a canopy. That canopy represents the discriminative ability of the intelligence to filter out what is good and what is bad. The ability of the intelligence to filter out the negative from entering into the mind. So that is actually the secret of success in one's spiritual life. So in this whole episode of the fight, what really happened was, I was talking about these mantras, the effect of these mantras. So because the positive mantras were so powerful, the demons just couldn't come down. The negative mantras were practically useless. Purification of the heart happens by chanting mantras. Manatrayate iti mantra. The word mantra means that which purifies the mind, that which controls the mind. So when we chant the mantra, like we chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, we are doing it so that the mind gets purified. Whatever is there, the mind should get purified. So, vibrations of words, vibrations of thoughts really affect our consciousness. In the Solomon Islands, there are woodcutters who live there. And they live a very interesting life. And they teach us a lot also. One of the ways in which they cut wood is that some of the trees are really tough and rugged trees. And the way they cut these trees is that they stand around the tree in circles and constantly bombard it with bad words for 1 hour. After 1 hour, they go and cut the tree, it falls very fast. Hard trees, if they can get affected by negative words, how about soft hearts? Will they not get affected by negative words? The more we surround ourselves with negative words, negative vibrations, the more negativity will be there in the heart. And the more the heart becomes weak and susceptible. The more we surround ourselves with positive, powerful vibrations, mantras, the more the heart will be resistant to negativity. The reason we are not able to handle negative vibrations in our life is because our heart is filled with negative vibrations. And the reason we are not able to restrict ourselves from negativity is because we don't have the protective covering of the intelligence to protect us. Therefore, we need the next law, which is known as the law of discrimination. Marich, the demon, he starts attacking Lord Ram. And Lord Ram shoots an arrow. And with one single arrow, he doesn't kill Marich. He uses an astra known as the Manava Astra. Manava Astra means humanitarian arrow. On humanitarian grounds, Ram shoots him and sends him 800 miles away. He falls into the ocean 800 miles away. He doesn't die. He gets a warning. But that warning, Mari is not able to use properly. We'll see that later. But the point is that Ram doesn't kill him. So whom does Marich represent? Marich represents people who do not have the ability to discriminate the right from the wrong. Marich represents those people who are risk takers, who love to take risks in their lives, who love to take the risk to the extent of sacrificing their own life sometimes because they are overconfident about themselves, overconfident of their own powers, and underestimate the power of the energy that they are going against. I'm going to show you a small video. It's a 10-second video practically, You might just miss it if you're not attentive. But this video, it just shows you one one thing. The one thing that comes out in this video very strongly is that if you don't understand your strengths and weaknesses, you will die. Very interesting. So, the concept of, be confident about your own abilities, don't undermine your own strength is good. But if that confidence pushes over to overconfidence, that's bad. So, what is discrimination? Basically, when you are arrogant of your own powers, you take unwarranted risks. If you are overconfident of your own powers, just like you jump off a building thinking that Superman will save you. What's it? It's a risk, right? You have too much confidence in somebody who will come and save you, right? So Marich represents risk takers. They depend on their own strength and they depend on advice from wrong mentors like Ravan. And more than that, they undermine the strength of the opponent. And more than that, because of the opposite, they overestimate their own strength, undermine the strength of the opponent, they take a reckless risk. And definitely they face failure. The question is now, how do you learn discrimination? How do you discriminate? How do you learn this quality of discrimination? Discrimination cannot happen when you are in the wrong frame of mind. For you to be able to discriminate the right and the wrong, you should be able to take the decisions when you are in the right frame of mind. Generally, most of our decisions, the most important decisions of our life, we take them when we are absolutely in the wrong mindset. There are 5 things or 5 mindsets where discrimination is lost. The first mindset is when there is too much joy. Just to give you all understanding, whatever I'm speaking, I know there is too much, it's like heavily loaded and all that. But just to give you some peace of mind, that most of the things that I'm speaking, the story and many of the lessons that I'm speaking are there in the book as it is. So you don't have to worry that I'm not making notes and this and that, I'll forget. And it's there in the book as it is. The only thing that I have done in this presentation is that I have brought in examples to make it more lively, basically. So basically, when it is difficult to discriminate, first thing, when there is too much joy, when there is too much joy in a person, that person, he cannot discriminate properly. In the Mahabharata, there is an example of Virat. When Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas were staying in the kingdom of Virat, one day, he was very, very happy because his son Uttar Kumar had defeated all the Kauravas together. What he didn't know was Brihanalla, Arjun, actually had defeated the Kauravas. But for him, his son had done it. And his son was like a young boy, first war, and he defeated all the Kauravas, the most powerful people in the world. So he was happy. And he told him, out of his happiness, he told Yudhishthira, come, let's play gambling. Yudhishthira told him, when you're too happy, you shouldn't gamble. Because when you're too happy, you'll make wrong decisions. Virat said, come on, nothing like that. I want to play. Come, sit. And then he was glorifying his son like anything. And Yudhishthira Maharaj just told him that as long as Brihanalla is there, your son will be victorious. Virat couldn't handle it. A eunuch and my son, he's comparing. He got really wild and angry. He took his dice and threw it on Yudhishthira Maharaj's head. The dice hit the head of Yudhishthira and it started bleeding. Yudhishthira was right. When there was too much joy, the ability to discriminate, when do you find the greatest crime happening in society? When there is too much joy. India-Pakistan match, India wins, you will find maximum amount of liquor being drunk, maximum amount of crime being happening. Why? People don't know how to handle joy. Very difficult. So, when there is too much hankering, that time also you don't know how to make the right decisions. Chitraketu wanted a son. desperate to want a son. He was ready to do anything to get a son. Narada Muni told him, I'll give you a son on one condition. You should name your son as Harsha Shoka. Harsha Shoka means your son will be the cause of joy to you, and the same son will cause sorrow to you later. This man, he was in a mode of hankering mode. He said, I don't care as long as I get a son. So the son was born, he named him as Harsha Shoka. And mechanically every day he would call him Harsha Shoka every day. Without thinking that one day, the one who is giving him Harsha, joy, is going to give him Shoka later, sorrow. And then at some point of time, the first wife, he had many wives. He was like Crorepati, he had 1 crore wives. He was the only Crorepati in fact. And the first wife gave birth to the son. And naturally, 1 crore minus 1, everybody else was envious on this wife. Because all the time he was giving her, to her. So all of them decided to poison the son. They poisoned him and killed him. And then he came back and he started crying. He said, you're gone, my son. He started lamenting like anything. Narada Muni told him, I told you, your son's name is Harsha Shoka. So when there's too much hankering, you cannot make right decisions. Anyway, I'm not getting into that story. We'll discuss it some other time. And when there is too much lamentation, when you're too sorrow, when you're too sad, that time also you can't make the right decisions. Gandhari, after the Mahabharata war, when her 100 sons were dead, she was so sad, she was so sorrowful, that she actually, without understanding what is right and what is wrong, she cursed Krishna. So, when you have identification with the body, when you identify the body too much, then also you cannot discriminate right and wrong. Many of our decisions, the most important decisions, are taken at this time, bodily concept, right? So, Indra, he was once cursed to become a pig in the earth planet. And he became a pig, and he got so attached to the pig body. He had a family, he had piglets, he had an entire kingdom of pigs, hundreds of people reporting to him about where stool is there, where there is fresh stool and where there is bad stool and all that. And he was so immersed in managing the affairs of his kingdom that he completely forgot who he was. And one, somebody came and, Narada Muni I think, came and told him, you are Indra. He said, what Indra? I am busy over here. I don't want to go anywhere, So when there is strong bodily concept, you tend to not be able to discriminate. And when there is too much attachment, that time also you cannot discriminate. Dhritarashtra, so attached to his son, so attached to the throne. Dhritarashtra, the one who is attached to the throne, Rashtra, his name is Dhritarashtra. And because of that intense attachment of Dhritarashtra, he could never take the right decision, if you all understand the Mahabharata. And when there is too much riches, too much wealth, too much Aishwarya, again, that time you lose discrimination. So the law of discrimination, what it really teaches us is that we shouldn't act like Marich, where there is too much overconfidence in one's own ability and you undermine other people's strengths and you take advice from the wrong person and in the wrong frame of mind. Then the last story is Ram, he takes another arrow. There's another demon whose name is Subahu. He takes another arrow which is named as Agni Astra and he shoots at Shubahu and burns him to ashes. And then he takes other arrows which are known as Vayava Astra and all the other demons that are there, he drives them away and kills them. The killing of Subahu teaches us the last law, which is known as the law of self-control. Subahu represents a person who has an untamed mind. So we need to discipline our untamed mind. Untamed animalistic mind. So the mind has the desire to run around and do whatever it wants without any thoughts, without any control, just wants to enjoy itself. So one has to use the chabuk, whip of strong intelligence to be able to keep the mind in control. So basically, we need two things to be able to control the untamed animalistic mind. One is the whip of a strong intelligence, and second is a protective fence which is a regulated lifestyle. So when we have a regulated lifestyle and we have the whip, then the mind, which is like an animal, which is mad, comes under control. So when the mind is not kept in control, then it takes to animalistic behavior and it has unruly desires. And the result is that one commits gross and subtle errors. So Subahu, he mistook the powerful to be weak and the weak to be powerful. So basically, one has to remember the law of self-control can be learned from the tortoise. The tortoise is an animal that teaches us how to resist temptations. When temptations come on us, how do you handle temptations? When there is a protective shell. If you have a protective shell around you, then you can always withdraw into that protective shell and then the temptations bounce off. But rather, instead of trying to be protected, you try to become overconfident. And the tortoise one day decides, my back is strong and so is my tummy. And decides one day to flip over and wait and watch for something to fall on its tummy. What will happen? That's not its strength. So basically, one has to learn that when one has the shell of a protective layer, that shell helps us handle and bounce off temptations. What's the shell for us? The shell for us is basically having the ability to develop positive thoughts. And how does this positive thoughts develop? If the shell is very strong, then positive thoughts develop. What is the shell essentially? In order for us to be able to make the right decisions, in order for us to have the right thoughts, we need to have three things. One is known as Sukruti. Sukruti means our past life credits. If you have strong past life credits, good things that you have done in the past, that becomes your protective cover. I don't know how many of us can say we have a strong shell, at least on that level. The second thing is Sangha. If we have the right kind of association, if we have the association of people who have viveka or discrimination, then those people become one layer in your life, give you protection from temptations. And the third thing is seva. When you perform service to devotees, to great sadhus, you'll attract what is known as kripa. That kripa becomes your shell from temptations. Many times, it is very difficult to resist temptations based on our own strength. Our own strengths are too less to resist temptations. We need kripa of great devotees. And the kripa of devotees manifests through seva. So when we have a combination of these three, Skruti, Sangha and Seva, that becomes like a shell that helps us to bounce off and becomes like a protective lifestyle. So to tame the untamed mind, animalistic mind, one needs a protective shell, and the protective shell comes from these three things. So I'll quickly summarize everything we spoke today. We started by talking about the story of Vishwamitra waking up Ram and Lakshman. The lesson that we learned was everyone needs inspiration to go up in one's life. Shiva and Kamadev, we learned from this story where Shiva burned down Kamadev. We learned how to deal with the mad mind. Kama means, another name for Kamadev becomes Ananga. Ananga means the one who doesn't have a body. Lust or desire really has no substance. It is only in the curious mind. And then Kama represents selfishness, the desire to enjoy for oneself. And how do you balance it? By the law of balance, where you balance selfishness with selflessness. The need to take, you balance by the desire to give. And then we saw the story of Malada and Karusha, these two forests, whom Indra blessed and Tataka destroyed. We learned the concept of curses and blessings. We saw the story of Tataka, and we learned how a leader has to be very sensitive in his decision making. We saw about how Ram was so sensitive. And from the concept of Tataka destroying the forest and Ram being sensitive to even a person who is so cruel, we learn the law of awareness. When there is awareness, there is knowledge. And when there is knowledge, then you can learn to become sensitive from being insensitive. And then we saw the story of Kaushiki and the 100 girls. We saw the concept of how change does not happen with time, but one has to work on change. Just like Kaushiki worked on herself, she did not allow abandonment to destroy her, but rather she used it as an opportunity to serve others. And then we saw the story of Siddhashram. We learned the law of trusteeship, that how we are not proprietors, but we are rather trustees or caretakers. And then finally we saw how the fight begins. We saw the effect of sound vibrations, mantras. And then we saw how Marich was ready to take all kinds of risks. And from him we learned the law of discrimination. And finally, from Subahu being reduced to ashes, we learned the law of self-control. Thank you very much. Very grateful to all of you all for being here. One announcement for tomorrow, a very important one. Tomorrow is the most exciting day because this is the story of Vishwamitra. If anybody doesn't know the story of Vishwamitra, you are in for a lot of surprises. There is more adventure and more thrill in tomorrow's 1-2 hours of this story than any other story you would have heard in the Bhagavad or in any of the Puranas ever. That is to inspire you all to come. Of course, there are a lot of valuable lessons. The topic tomorrow is you rise when your pride falls. So just to tell one more thing before we end, you must have seen already that the Ramayan is a book which is filled with unlimited scope and unlimited lessons to learn and to teach and help others. We want to spread this knowledge as much as possible. We are having our own limited resources and abilities to spread. If any of you all are inspired by the way this, the teachings are of the Ramayana and would be happy to help us in spreading this knowledge better, either by, finding out different ways in which this knowledge can be spread, we are most happy to discuss. We have already made a small team which is actually working on it very, very intensely. You can join this team and help us in whatever way you can. All your skills will be put to best use in this. And also, if you know of people who are inspired by such teachings, we could also teach others in some institutions or in some corporate organizations or whatever else. So we're trying to still work out what is the best way to spread this knowledge in the most effective way. And you must have already seen that this is a very non-traditional approach towards spirituality. It's a very out-of-the-box approach towards spirituality where we are not really thrusting spirituality in people's lives, but rather we are allowing people to appreciate the spiritual content and then allow them to accept it in the way they want to, So this is another medium we thought we should exercise. So if anybody would like to let us know, you're most welcome. Thank you very much.